we're going to actually put some antique finish. This is my favorite stuff to use on this. This is the Minwax antique finish here. It goes on pretty good. So we're going to put that on the wood. This is going to take a few coats. We're going to have to sand and kind of buff it in between. Right now we got the wood nice and smooth. It's all been stained. No more hairs are popping up. So we're good here. We're ready to do that. So get some gloves here. I'm going to pop that dude open. When we put this on, there's a couple of ways you can do it. According to the directions, you can kind of glob it on, let it sit for a little bit, and pull it off. That works. You can definitely do that. I kind of come from the era of hand-rubbed oil finishes, or like the thing, so it's hard for me to get over that. So what I like to do is I like to put a very thin hand-rubbed finish in here, and then I'll let that sit for a little while, and then I'll come back and I'll do probably one more today, here in a few hours, and then after that's set, then I'll actually take and I'll sand a finish in after that's all done. From there, I'll let that cure, and then I'll buff it all down with, usually you could use steel wool. Steel wool leaves little metal hairs. I like to use a red Scotch Brite stop pad. So we'll buff that down, and then I'll put on the thick coat, let it set for a while. After it dries, I'll buff it back down. Once you get into the thick coats, it's every day. You have to wait 24 hours before you can come back and touch it again. So I'm going to put a thin coat on here, and then we'll go from there. So I'm just going to put some in my hands, very little bit. Well, the goal right now is to just get it all over the wood. We can get into really rubbing it in here in a bit. Right now, we just want to get it on the wood. Now it's going to get sticky on the metal. That's okay. Mineral spirits will take that right off. That's not even a slight area for concern in this. It may act as a glue when we get it on real thick around the metal parts. It's okay, it's to be expected. It's helping make that fit a little bit nicer, a little bit cleaner. It'll be fine. So again, right now, because it's just raw wood, it's going to take a lot. As this kind of process ends up going a little bit deeper, it won't take near as much oil over time to really soak into that wood. By the time this is all said and done, a couple of drops will cover the whole thing. But it does take some time to get there. And this is not a part we can rush. If we rush this part, then it's all for naught. It seems like a heavier coat than it actually is, I promise. This is actually considered a pretty light coat right now, just because of the rate in which it's sucking it in. It'll start to get kind of sticky as we go, and that's about where we want. Once it starts getting a little tacky, that's when we can actually start doing the hand rub. And you can see it's really starting to come alive now, even with just that thin coat. So what the end goal here is going to be, really is going to get that look to just stay. That's kind of the look we're going for. Every little bit of wood is going to act a little different. Some are going to take the shine a little bit more. Others will be a bit more matte. Others take more coats. Some of them you'll swear they won't seal up, and then next thing you know, you put one more real thin coat and it's just caked on and it's all good and it's ready to go. Just let the wood do its thing. It's the natural product. Nature made it the way nature wanted it. Let it be. We just choose its color. That's all we really get, and even then, it's an agreement more than anything else. Alright, so from here, we're getting some friction, for sure. And we need the friction. That's part of the hand rub process here, is friction. What we're really doing is we're using the heat from that rubbing to actually cure, for lack of a better term, the finish on the surface, and that's going to help it sink in a little bit deeper too. There's some science that if you're a chemist, you probably know I don't. So now, we're just going to rub, and this is probably going to end up ripping through the glove, and I'll get real sticky, and I'll get mad about it. But once it gets to a point where it's hot on the hand, it's time to move on to the next spot. I think that's where we're going to stop for right now. We're going to give this a couple hours, and then we'll come back, throw another coat on, do the same thing, and then tomorrow we'll go ahead and we'll wet sand that down with some 600. And what I mean by wet sand is we're actually going to sand the finish in. So we're going to use more of our finish on the sandpaper for 600, depending on kind of where we're at and how deep the pores are. And we're going to sand that, and we actually want to go like not with the grain but across the grain. What we're trying to do is we're actually trying to pack the pores with the finished dust. Once we get that, we'll let that kind of do its own business. It's going to be fuzzy, it's going to be nasty, it's going to be ugly. Then we'll come back with the red pad and we'll buff it down nice and smooth. And then we'll apply another coat of finish. And that one will be a heavier coat. And we'll do the same thing again until the wood is sealed. Once the wood's sealed, we'll put another thin coat on and leave it be. And that'll kind of give us the shine. Then we can go over with that red pad and we can buff it down to the shine that we actually want. I tend to like a more matte shine, so I'll tend to buff that down pretty good. But that's where we're going to terminate this video. And then when we come back, it's going to be at the finish here with the sandpaper. So this will be all you guys see of tonight's process. Sorry this is taking so long, but this is woodwork and it eats up shop time like crazy. So I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Alright, we're at the point of sanding in the finish now. We're going to start off with some 400 grit sandpaper. Set up your sandpaper for sanding. We actually want to tear this down. Up there, we are going to fold that guy back around. I like to leave the tail to lock in, and then we are going to fold it back over and loop it back up. We at no point want two faces of sandpaper touching. Now, we're just going to pour ourselves some finish on the sandpaper. So as we see here, just got some finish on the sandpaper, and all we're going to do is we are going to work in circles at first. We do not want to necessarily sand with the grain, so we just lightly buff it. All we're going for is lightly buffing it. If we start running out, let's add some more, just like that. All we want is to create enough sawdust type material to fill in the pores of the gun. Now up here in the point of the comb is where it's going to give us the most hassle. So I like to add a little extra there just to make that happen. We want to go in circles and not with the grain, because if we go with the grain we run the risk of pulling that dust out of the pores that we're trying to put it into. Right, we are coming up to done here on this pass here anyways. Now this is not going to be an even coat of finish, and that's fine. It's going to be kind of thick. We'll take care of all that in the next step where we go through with the red pad and buff it down even. What we're going for here is to fill in the wood. That's all we want. Not going for pretty, we're not going for even or smooth, just want the wood filled. Be sure to hit that metal. Seems counterintuitive, but we're going to refinish the metal anyways. So if you start getting to a point where your pad gets gummed up with the dust, that's fine. Just tear that off, get that out of the way. I'm going to go ahead and pop that tail off that I put on. I've got fresh paper right there, ready to go. Once we're done with this, we're going to let it set for another 24 hours, let the finish harden up, and then we will repeat this process with 600 grit. We'll go from there. This should give us a pretty good starting point. We're having some of these pores filled in. 600 should really take us all the way, and after that we'll be able to buff it off and just lay in a nice finishing coat. I think that is where we are going to end this one for today. I'll touch up here, and by the end of this process, this buttstock will be nice, and then we will move on to the other side. See you guys tomorrow. New day, we're back. This time we are going to run some 600 grit paper, and when we feel the stock right now, I don't know if you guys can hear that. It's very rough, it's very gritty. It feels like we just ruined it. It's okay, totally normal. We're just going to wet this out, Mind you, last time was 400, this time it's 600. And we're just gonna repeat that process again. Still going in circles. This time we want to use kind of a liberal amount of the finish. We really are just trying to seal it up nice and tight. Now we've got all the stuff kind of floated there at the top. It's been suspended in the dry, what is now dry finish. And we are just going to take this, and we're just going to work in circles here. And I want to pay a little extra attention around the end of the wood here to make sure we get that nice and well. Now we're just going to continue that process all the way around. And you hear it smooth out a little bit as you go. That's usually a pretty good sign that you're getting into the old finish now. Remember, circles, not with the grain. If anything, go across the grain. If you go with the grain, you pull it out. We want to keep it in there. We're trying to fill in the wood. That's all we're going for right now. Not going for an even pretty coat. We're just trying to fill it in. Just like that. We're waiting another 24 hours. Alright, so at this point we're going to go ahead and buff this dude down. So these pads are very thick, very large. We don't need all of this space. Typically, I will cut them down and then split them, or you can buy them in thinner sections. I'm just going to fold this guy up because what I don't want is finger grooves or patterns in the wood. It'll look almost like waves. So we're just going to give that some space there, roll it up, and we're just going to lightly scuff off the top edge here. It's going to take on this kind of matte grayish look. I don't know if it's going to show up on camera, but it is absolutely normal, totally expected. But what we want to do is we just feel, and we are just trying to get that fuzziness off that we left from the sanding. That's all we're going for. And we can go with the grain, circles. It shouldn't matter at this point because we're not actually going into the wood. We're just messing with the finish that's sitting on top of the wood. Now we're going to come across some places that either we missed, sucked up the finish, or just didn't take. It's okay. We'll get it. We're not done. This is not the last step. It's okay if it comes out ugly or uneven. This is all just part of the process right now. As we go through with this process on this gun, though, these little red pads are going to become invaluable. They're going to be used for all sorts of stuff. I use these in lieu of steel wool, because steel wool likes to leave that little fuzzy hair mess it creates behind. These don't do that. A little bit cleaner, a little bit faster for cleanup times. It's just, I think it's the better product, personally. But as we go through this process here, I'm hoping I can drop some tips and tricks I've picked up over the years on this. Again, we're not really looking for the evenness of the coat right now. We're just going for getting it all taken care of. And this step is where it's actually going to start taking the most amount of time, just because we're going so slow. Over time, we're going to gum up, and we can kind of flick it and knock some of that out. That's just that finish clogging it up. That's okay. Attention to detail is important in the woodworking game. This is where your hand hits, so if you miss a spot, you will notice. Yeah, we're leaving all these little scratches. Again, that'll be fine. We're not to the point where that's going to really start to matter just yet, but we will get there. And we'll address it when it happens. But as you go, you'll notice lots of little scratches from this stuff. Especially where you break direction, so like up here, where I've had to go down to make sure I get all the little spots. I can definitely see them there. One nice thing about not doing this on camera is I can actually flip the gun around and see on camera. If I can see, you can't see. And that is part of the problem of playing the game of we both need to be able to see. And who needs to be able to see more? Now, I'm just going to take a cloth here. I'm just going to wipe down some of that dust we've created here. I just want to take a quick kind of an oblique lighting angle so we still have some pores that aren't quite filled, but there's definitely some stuff down in them, so we're getting there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll this pad so that I've got fresh stuff on the outside here. And I'm actually going to take off a considerable amount of that finish. Just try and thin it out so we can level it. Now we're leveling. We're going to definitely go with the grain and try and keep these scratches in line here. And as that progresses, we'll chip away at it. Any of those scratches or anything we had. And hopefully, when this is done, we'll have removed all the finish around the pores, leaving only the finish in the pores, and then we can actually finish the wood. The wood will be sealed at that point. Now, right here is the spot that seems to be fighting me the most. And that's in part due to there's a big knot right there. Not so big that it's going to cause problems structurally, but it is definitely a character of the wood that needs to be addressed, and that's where most of your big pores will, for lack of a better term, your little pockets in the wood. Go around this guy and try and level this out as well as I can, and I'll bring you guys back when that's done. Now that we are back, and I'm going to try to show this here. I don't know if that's going to show up. Nope. Okay, so there are some pores. If I get right up above them, I can see they're almost filled. Right there. So we have to make a decision here. Do we do another wet sanding, or do we just apply a heavy coat? Now, it's not always an easy one to come up to with an answer for. Because I got some in here that look fairly deep. I got some that are right there at the surface. So, what's the best thing we can do? Well, let's do another hand rub finish on it. And that'll give us a pretty good indicator of where we're at. And we're just going to put some on the hands here. And it's not going to take very much this time. We're just going to kind of rub that in real hard and fast here. Now, you can definitely see it now. We've got some right here where it's just not quite completely filled in. And that's pretty true on both sides right there. And I think that's from the butt plate there. I think that's what we're going to do. I think we're just going to put a heavy coat on. And we'll come back tomorrow. We'll buff that back down. If that all goes well, we'll do one more hand rub, very thin finish, just to fill in the scratches. And then it should, hopefully, be ready to go tomorrow. And I'll move on to the forend. I probably won't get that on camera, just because it should not be taking this long. This is too long now. About a week into this. This is only supposed to take a couple days. So on the forend, I'm not going to do it. I'll go ahead and get the video up probably of the butt stock. We'll work on this a little bit here. For the few subscribers that I do have, if you guys would like maybe a live on some stuff, by all means, let me know. Shoot me some message. I was considering a live, kind of like a Q&A, gunsmithing related, obviously. So if that's something you guys are interested in, let me know, and we'll see if we can set that time up on what would work better for everyone's schedule. I'm thinking probably a Sunday or a Monday. It just kind of depends on what y'all have going on, but it'll be a good time. We'll have some fun with it. Let me know if these are the videos you guys would prefer for me to do. I mean, this is definitely more in my comfort zone, so by all means, reach out, let me know if this is what I suck least at or something. I'm going to shut this down for the day. We'll hopefully be back here later on today but tomorrow is probably more realistic. So, see you guys in. Alright, so we're done. Finally with this portion. All that's left now is to get rid of any dust or anything that's settled on it throughout the night. So we're just going to get some cheesecloth here. And this isn't tacky or anything like this. It's just a really thin, very open grain cloth. And we're just going to buff it with this. And that's just going to smooth out as much as it can, realistically. If you really want it smooth, by all means, just keep going over and over and over again. And this is a natural product. It's wood. It's going to feel weird sometimes. So, but yeah, that's really all it's going to end up being here. And this is where we're going to call this guy. So, let's see if I can't bring in here. So you can see down inside those pores are sealed. And that's really what we're going for here. We've got good reflectivity to it, but if you want to mat that down, one easy way of doing that is to just get some like 1000 grit sandpaper and just buff it, wet sand it with that if you have to. But you can really take that sheen off if that's really what you're wanting. But just going over it with the cheesecloth here. Will actually help to kind of shine it. You might be able to buff it out with some steel wool. Again, I'm not a huge fan of the little wires that steel wool leaves behind, but it's an option. That's what we're gonna end this series on this guy here. For you guys, it's one video. For me, it's been a week and change. But yeah, so we're gonna end this, and I'm gonna try and get this guy edited and posted up, and then I will do probably a bench top when I get both of these done, but that'll be its own video. All right, well, thanks for hanging in.